Get ready for a double dose of permaculture wisdom. First, we're joined by Doc Spicer, a permaculture expert who's known for his innovative designs and regenerative farming insights. Next up is Lachlan Storrie, a former biologist turned sustainability champion, who shares his journey from research to the founding of Tree Frog Permaculture. Tune in for a power-packed episode on creating a greener, more sustainable future.
Hey guys, welcome to the podcast, and today we've got Dave Spicer. So Dave, tell us a bit about yourself.
G'day guys. Well, look, I'm a jack of all trades, mastering some, I say now. But I'm a permaculture designer, but I specialise in earthworks. I operate excavators and install the design. So design to reality, I say. So I sort of primarily focus on that. I really think there's a power in design because we work with water, and then we're not conflicting against the patterns of water, which is the patterns of nature. And in the end, what I say I do is I observe patterns in landscapes, and then I apply another set of specific patterns on top of that, really in relation to human habitat. I've found over time good access on broadacre properties is good interaction. If we can't access it, we don't really interact with it. And when we start to interact with it, we engage and we observe, and then we let our site demonstrate its evolution, because we can put ourselves in a place of comfort so we can open our minds to see landscape instead of just racing across it. So that's really what I do. I build the bones of the system, whether that's through water and access, and then structure, position, and infrastructure. So I've done many different things before I come to what I do in permaculture design. I worked in the building game and forestry and horticulture, agriculture, steel fabrication. So jack of the trades, mastering some, I say, mate. Yeah.
They used to call that a farmer, didn't they?
Yeah, well, absolutely, mate. Absolutely. Yeah. You know, it's a diverse skill set's really important, you know.
Yeah, that's it. 100%. Yeah. So, I mean, you touched on a few things there. So, you know, with permaculture, it's about designing with water, access, and structure. So, what's the reason we design with water in mind first? Like, what's the reason you start with that?
Well, if we don't design with water in mind, we've got continuous problems. We've got, when we have a big rain event, look at the number of driveways that have just been cut in without the appropriate drainage or shape. How much money does that cost people in maintenance of a road? So if we get our road in the right place, but the only place we can put that road in is when we look at the water. And if we can manage the water from the top of the system or the landscape down through the site, we can ideally store water above our infrastructure, so then we get gravity-fed water for free, in a sense, no pumps. And that's gold when you can turn the tap on a site. Anyone who's gone off-grid knows when they can turn the tap and get running water, that's actually a huge milestone. So looking at water, storing water up in the landscape, in pondage, but also creating, what I found is we all like to live around water. So let's create a view with water. Water is the ultimate thermal mass, so we can really regulate climate, the local climate with a water body. So if we can place water around our habitat, it's a more moderate temperature, and it's a beautiful thing to look on. And then once we've got our water worked out, and then our house is not flooding or water's not coming through the house, we can give it the appropriate drainage. But also getting that access that fits on the landscape and also has a relationship to water harvesting, because a gravel road runs off 85% of the water. So, and if you do a bit of math on a road at 3 meters wide by let's take 1 square metre, 10 mil of rain on a square metre is 10 litres. That's a lot of water, particularly if you're in a dry landscape. So we can look at roads and roofs as hardware, and where do we plug that hardware into our software, which is our sponges. And then once we've got water and access, then we actually got another layer to come in and put our infrastructure in. Now, whether that's water lines for irrigation or whatever, or power, however we want to do it, electric fencing. But it's a layer upon a layer. And once you've got that, it's a basic mainframe. And then you can go zones and sectors, which are a bit more, sectors are your wild energies. So, where's your fire, where's your flood, etc. So once you've got this sort of mainframe, it takes away the splatter in design, because you've got the edges to work from.
Yeah. So, can you give some examples of some things you've seen go wrong with a bad design over the years, or so if I was buying a property, going through what am I looking for? Some things that you can see.
Yeah, good point, mate. Look, ideally, if you can get yourself into the mid slope of the landscape, or up off the valley floor, well, then you're out of flood. You certainly don't want to go on top of the hill. I know people do for the view, but then you got wind and you got fire, and you always got to have water pumping to you. So if we can get in the mid slope between the lower sort of slope and the mid slope, then we've got the potential to store water above us. But we're out of the cold because cold air sinks. We can often pick up a thermal belt, which is a more moderate climate. So having a gentle form, like people buy steep bits of land, like steep slope, which means you have to put everything out on terraces to be able to garden or crop it. So it makes it awkward. Yeah. So having a look at that sort of gentle landscape, up off the valley floor but not on the ridge, is really the ideal sort of situation. Yeah. And so, like a forested watershed is another big one. Actually having some sort of forested system where your catchment comes from, because your water quality is much better.
So you're saying make sure you get trees above you?
Yeah, if you can. I mean, it's not always possible, but just think of how much cleaner that water flow is going to be moving through your property.
Yeah, no, definitely. So if I'm looking at buying a block of land, how do you see some telltale signs of some bad design work already? Just by looking at the landscape, what's some things you look for to say, look, this is going to cause us issues? Because if I'm going to buy a block of land off grid, I really maybe an hour, a couple of hours to have a look at the property with a real estate agent. What would you be looking for?
Yeah, look, if there's nothing on it, then it's a clean slate. When you're sort of trying to retrofit, it makes it a bit more difficult. Look at erosion patterns. You can look at into trees. You can sort of in the last few years, so if they're burnt. You can, along fences, you can look at debris deposits from floods. So it'll pick up in fences. Look at any little bits of erosion. Are you going to have problems? How much is it going to cost you to sort these erosion problems out? If there's a road, where's the drainage? Look at retrofitting, existing dams, how you connect them to a bigger catchment or overflow them onto another dam. Really, it's having somewhat accessible. I had a wealthy client, and he was looking at buying property, and he kept sending me these properties. And he said, look, it's all timbered because, as we know, property price of timber has skyrocketed. And he said, it's all timbered. I said, yeah, but most of that timber is still there because I can't access it. It's too steep. So look at your contour map. Even though they're just a guide, don't trust them until you get out there and survey, for me anyway. But look at, if you want a mill in the future off your property, how can you access it, What sort of access can you put on top of it to utilise the property? Because if you can't access it, it just goes into a zone 5, and then if there's no management, then it becomes a fire issue, and you sort of get burn out. Yeah.
So have you ever had a situation where, you maybe looked at a property or someone's purchased a property, there's a lot of bad erosion, you've had to put a whole new driveway in and come from somewhere else?
Sometimes it's cheaper to terminate a driveway and bring it in on the right sort of pattern, so you actually work with the landscape, and also remember what I said before about that water that road having a relationship to water, so that can actually run a lot of water off into a high dam, ideally. What I often look for is there a road above the property, and has that where does that water run off the road into the property? Because that means I've got potentially a really high dam with good runoff area for gravity-fed water. So that's one of the things I really look for is high water. Can I put a dam up high that gives me gravity-fed water? And what can I charge it with? I've sort of gone away from the classic model of swale. And so I sort of look at, I've done a few gradient roads in my time, which are quite interesting. So it's a road with a slight fall to a dam. So it picks up all the water coming off the ridges and runs it around into a dam. And they work great because they give you access, but also a water harvesting capacity. Yeah.
So when you're talking about access, are you talking about mainly just putting a drive into the property, or what else do you mean when you talk about access?
Well, it's a bit like in a permaculture context, a lot of people go swale. Where I've actually changed my mode a bit to a more of a terraced form, so that terrace could be on a level or could have a slight fall, so it runs water. But that terrace gives me actually access through the landscape. I can still put tree systems along it, like a swale along the edge, or like along the berm edge, or the mound, but I can still access it, and that gives me access across landscape. That gives me potentially a laneway for running livestock, and then that's easy for me, or easy to create cells off that laneway, run your water, so you've got irrigation or for your stock watering points. So it helps to pattern out the landscape. And as I said, good interaction. Good access is good interaction. If we don't observe and we don't interact, well, we don't learn. So, it's not just a driveway. It's more about, having a central driveway to your infrastructure and from your access to your infrastructure. But what can you take off that driveway? So you can come down and shoot off on a contour or whatever you want to do, but so you can interact with the landscape, and then, come around a valley, drop back down onto a ridge, and you can almost circuit around the site. And think of, once you got that circuit, if you run water around that, lay a pipe, well, then you've got all water through the heart of the property, in a sense. So to establish orchards, like I said, for grazing livestock, etc., it just simplifies it.
Yep. Now, so I got one for you. So I'm looking at the property myself at the moment, and I'll share this. So do you want to maybe explain to people what contour layers mean and what they do for people to understand? Yep. This is just coming up here.
Cool, mate.
There we go.
Yeah. So you go or me?
Yeah. So explain the contour layers and.
All right. Well, if you look at Mike's picture there, and you can see the lovely little coloured lines. So each shade of that colour is representing a height that is higher than sea level. So the red going to the yellow, goes to the green, to the light blue, to the dark blue. That's lower down in the landscape, and as you see from the picture, it's quite flat when you get to where the trees are and the nice open paddocks down there. So I can look at that and go, right, well, I've got a ridge because it runs around it. So, and the valley comes back up into the boundary, in a sense. So it tells me where water flows. Water flows right angle to contour. Don't get too. Sometimes it's very hard to see contour. What I do when I teach an earthworks course is actually get people out and survey it, because that gives them the physical reality of and they also learn, don't trust contour maps, because they go, that contour goes like that, but then when I survey it, it doesn't go like that. It's just a guide, remember, but it tells me the form of the landscape. It tells me, it's like your knuckles here. I've got a valley that runs down there, another valley here, and that's the ridge. So that's when I look at Mike's picture there, it's a little bit like my knuckles here, because it's got a ridge, a valley, another ridge, a valley, and a bigger valley, like the primary valley. and then another primary ridge that goes right around there. But I can tell that from that, looking at that, that's where the water's going to run down there. So that's a watershed, and that's the water catchment. So it helps me identify where potential flooding is going to come from, where I can place a dam, where is more likely going to have good clay deposits for that dam, and also where can I, the wider the contours go apart, the flatter it is. The steeper the contours together, the steeper it is, okay? So as soon as they start to go wider, I know the landscape is getting gentle enough to be able to come around on a contour parallel with them lines.
Yeah. So with this block of land, I talked about before, a steeper block of land where this is pretty much completely flat out the front. What would you recommend on something like this? Some things you could do to improve this type of land? And so this is literally the beach. It's 900 meters to the beach, so it's really sandy.
Yeah. Well, look, I think what I'd look at doing initially is I often see eucalypt forests as very degraded systems. And there's this thing called senescence, and that's when like trees actually start to touch in their canopy. They actually just sit and go stagnant. And often there's very little diversity underneath these eucalypt forests. So to start to cycle some of that material down, put it onto the ground, cut it up with a chainsaw. It's a bit of work. That actually reduces the fire load because the fungal hyphae comes up in there and holds the moisture. That actually, you go through it and selectively thin the rubbish trees out, or take your firewood off, fence posts, polewood, some saw logs potentially. But that enhances the forest. It also creates a sponge high up in the landscape. So you could start working that down the system. I'd look at putting some higher dams in them two valleys, to give myself gravity-fed water.
So you're talking up here?
Yep. I can't see your cursor.
Right at the back, sort of where it goes.
Yeah, right up the back. Yeah. You got sort of two valleys in there. One primary valley. I'd put a dam up in there. And if you can go like 8 meters, a little bit higher is better, but 8 meters gives you like mains pressure. So that's a, then you've got irrigation. And you also got to think of high dams as you place a tank up high. Well, that could be $3,000 to $5,000. Well, you could build a small dam 4 or 5 times the size of that tank by building a dam that has longevity. So think about that as a water storage. I'd be putting it out. Is there actual water course through there? There is, isn't there? Or not? Yeah, where you got the dam, I can see there's probably a little bit of erosion in there. Do some like leaky weirs, which I'm not sure if your readers be familiar with Peter Andrews' stuff. Basically, we've got to be the Aussie beaver and start constructing these leaky weirs to create a set of like pondage through the landscape. They're not sealed like a dam, but they create a deposition system. So we're holding the fertility in the landscape, because often what we've done is we've drained everything, okay, to farm. And where does our nutrient go? Like water is the ultimate medium. Everything, almost everything dissolves in water and moves in water. So if we can create deposition systems, like gutters on our house, if we can create gutters on our house, like across the landscape, we created deposition systems. I often say we only got to take one step in the right direction, and nature takes 10. And that one step for me is generally planting the rain. And that's by creating deposition. So I'd pattern that out. I'd define your water course, where your access comes in, and then I'd pattern it out on some sort of probably keyline form. So you still got production. You can put tree systems in, but you can still crop in between. It depends on your context.
Yeah. So explain a bit more about keyline form. Like, what do you mean by that?
Well, keyline is again looking at that contour lines or contour, your form of your landscape. And often it's about pushing water from the valley out to the ridge. But one of the really important, and I'm no expert on keyline, I certainly have a good generalist comprehension of it, But one of the things I like about Keylon is it's easy to fence around, because if you're going to bring in animals or you're going to fence off sections, you do contour, then you've got a strainer. Every time you bend, you've got to have a strainer and a stay, or a set of stays. So Keylon gives you parallel geometries with tree systems, and you can do that in block work. And it's more efficient. You can do a tree system and then you can do a crop, you know. You can look at some of the stuff coming out with syntropic ag, which has become well known, and that's often laid out on the Keylon system. And it's all just about looking at your contour, working out the best way, how it fits on the landscape. How can you section up these blocks? Yeah. So,
what's going on in this picture here?
All right, so this is actually at Permaculture Sydney Institute, and this is on I was doing a couple of days' work this is up on the Upper McDonald River.
The Hawkesbury.
Yeah, the Hawkesbury, yeah. And it's a really gnarly ridge, rocky ridge, really quite steep around the other side. Now, Penny, she wanted to put tree systems on there, but to access it, it was, well, you know, it was pretty awkward. And to put a ladder on there and actually try to pick a piece of fruit, you could end up down there bottom pretty quickly. So what I've done is I come in and put terraces in. And so the terrace still has a tilt in it, so the water sits in here, so it still acts like a swale. But it gives you can drive your little four-wheeler or whatever around it, or you can push a wheelbarrow around it, put tree systems on the berm. So that's gone from a watershed, because it's all sort of a sandstone rocky ridge. So everything's running off that ridge. It's always dry, okay? So what we've done is we've run 2 terraces around it, and that's like a Keylon because they're parallel. Okay, 2 terraces around it. So that's created a deposition system. That would totally change the hydraulics of that bit of landscape. And giving you access, it was a bit useless. Yeah, you could graze it, but now she can put tree systems on it. So it's gone from a watershed to a deposition system, and that's a swale around the bottom of it as well, which was done years ago. If you look just below the mirror on the excavator, there's actually a road, an access coming down there. Now there's already a bit of erosion going on. So what we intend to do is put a pipe, pick up the water from the top side of the road and shoot it through underneath the road into the top terrace. That can overflow into the next terrace. That's the other advantage about doing these sorts of works, is we can take water from one point, bring it around a dry ridge, and then have it back flood and overflow where we want it. It's sort of the difference between putting it on a fall with a diversion drain or a gradient road. We can only spill that water one way, whereas when we go on a level, we can hold 150 mil of water in it, and we can choose where that overflows.
Yeah. So, mate, on this flat bit of land here, so would you recommend like swales on a flat bit of land? Like, what do you recommend with that there? Like, what would you do?
Well, like, you know, I don't know if I would. I just I'd probably, what I'd look at doing is, yeah, if you want to push water one way to a dry point, okay, but why not lay it out on a basic pattern, this sort of keyline pattern? And depending on what you wanted to do, but I mean, what would you want to put livestock in it? Would you want to graze it? Well, as in, would you want to crop it, or tree systems, or?
Well, so ideally with this project here, it's actually become an eco village. So
so it's about human habitat. So then access is critical. So what I would do is look at your water system. Where's your drainage? Because we have to work with the water system. Okay. So how can we create a little pondage? Where can we get a dry point to cross that pondage or that valley? Lay out your access, because we want, if it's for human habitat, we want good access. But then people probably want to be able to look onto a view of water, you know, a set of ponds. So I'd look at that valley system, and I'd do a series of ponds down that valley system, and then I'd have access that comes through in between the 2 dams that you've got sort of drawn there, and then then either side, you could come up like a little cul-de-sac and actually pattern out your housing so you've got your little habitat. And that's sort of one of the things I wanted to touch on today. Really was I see huge need for what I'm terming building our lifeboats, because what I found is like to developing or retrofitting this old house was creating that outdoor space where we've got a view of water. I look out my window in the kitchen, I can see my dam down the bottom. I've got another dam out the back with my outdoor kitchen area. So I can sit there and I can look on water. And when I look on water, well, there's life comes to water. So I've created a view. And then we've got fruit trees and nut trees around it, and we've got gardens. So it's a comfortable space to be in. And that's good for your mind, you know. I think this is the things that we need to get back to, creating this, as Zach Bush, Dr. Zach Bush, you might be familiar with, but he says, breathe your biome. So we need these tree systems and life systems around to actually inform our bodies to how to deal with toxins and all these sorts of things. But, you know, grapes, well, that's a picture of my grape there. Well, I've got grapes 4 months of the year. You know, I've got 3 varieties of grapes, but they shade the house so I don't get any direct sun on me north and northwest side of the house. Like first couple of years, I grew pumpkins, you know. I got pumpkins, but I got shade. So bringing these life systems into the house to fortify it, you know, make it more comfortable, more enjoyable. It's more economical because then we're not paying more for electricity.
Hey guys, and welcome to the podcast today. Today we're talking with Lachlan Storrie. Lachlan's based in the Newcastle region in New South Wales, Australia. So Lachie, tell us a bit about yourself, mate.
Hello, everybody. My name is Lachlan Storrie. I run a small business called Tree Frog Permaculture, and been about 13, 14 years now, and I sort of consult, design, educate, and implement permaculture systems and all sorts of related things through the area. And basically, I started in science, was heading into biotech, and then I realized I'd be stuck in a lab pipetting for the rest of my life. And I saw insanity on the horizon, and I decided I couldn't do that. So I needed to do something a little more direct for sustainability and the environment. So I ended up doing some postgrad research with the green and golden bell frog, because biology and ecology was what I ended up with in education. And then I decided, because the funding was coming from iffy places, and again stuck in a lab and huge amount of writing on a computer, crazy town, I would go and make frog ponds for people. And then that turned into permaculture when I found the permaculture philosophy, because that touches on everything under the sun, basically, as far as systems approach to sustainability and if you want to use the term, off-grid living. Yeah.
Mate, so tell us more about it. So what was it that really attracted you to that permaculture philosophy?
I think like we tend to get very bogged down in given elements in society, and the permaculture philosophy, it's a holistic one. So if you know what I mean by holistic, it takes every bit of new information and existing information out there, and it collates it into a system of approach where basically it guides you into doing the most like sustainable thing with the information you've got at the time. And it's about like learning how to set up systems that work more with nature than against them. And that applies from, you know, growing our food all the way through to like getting our energy supply, housing, social connection, everything you can think of, basically. Of course, a lot of my realms in the garden world and food production and that sort of thing. But basically, like it's so much about creating the appropriate healthy ecosystems that are then supporting our lives and the food systems we're using to grow our food. And the industrial agriculture system is tragically damaging in its current state, and how we treat water as probably the world's most precious resource, fresh water. It's a bit sad. Yeah, so we need to do better, and this is one of the, I found permaculture is just one of the best all-round holistic approaches and philosophies around all of this stuff. And just like energy conservation approach. Yeah,
that's it. So for me, like when I did my permaculture course, I did my PDC with Jeff Lawton. I did my online course with Jeff, and then decided I really want to go to a face-to-face one. Did end up doing the face-to-face one. And one of the biggest thing that hit home for me, because I come from an energy background, that's what I was all about, was this. And permaculture is an energy audit. It's just that simple, and it's about using less energy to get more out of a system, but then also using that same amount of energy to get more done. So that for me was the biggest thing I took about it, and went back and applied that to, I already been applying it to everything in my life, but I really focused on that. Did a whole big energy audit and everything I was doing. And that was a game changer for me after doing a PDC, that one thing. So
I recommend it. They should be teaching them at school, quite honestly. This is like handy stuff across the board. Yeah,
totally. We did on the weekend. So we had last week was a huge big week for us. Road trip to Sydney for a wedding, back up the coast, and literally got home Friday, and then took the kids to a kids permaculture weekend. And it was thinking, it was 4 days, half a day Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then half a day Monday. And we didn't stick around Monday because the kids they wanted to go home, go see mum.
They were cooked.
But for me, it was really interesting. We sat around Monday night, and I said to the kids and asked them some questions about, what was it they got out of it from the weekend. And I was actually so surprised of how much my kids remembered. Like, my son would be labeled with that name ADHD, just like his dad, and he got so much out of it. And one of the biggest things that the first thing he said was, Dad, I learned so much on the weekend about, kids in their toilet talk is like, even poo can give things other life. They take your poo and they compost it and put it in the garden, and it gives something else another life and creates something else. It was just so amazing to hear him say that and what we got out of it. So it was for me, it was definitely, there's a few things I was pretty embarrassed about, to be honest, that he didn't know. I'm like,
you haven't instilled the wonders of poo in your children, Mike?
I know. But
come on, that's the first thing you do.
But then they were so engaged the whole time and really into it, and they're just seeing how much they learnt from it. It was just amazing. So, and we we're in there a couple of months now, but we cut our kids off from technology. We're like, nah, no more. And it's been a game changer. And it's seeing them that whole weekend really engaged. I think if we wouldn't have done the trip to Sydney and on been so much driving around, they probably would have made that last half a day, for the thing. But it's been a big couple of weeks for them. So, I'm definitely same thing. I think the school system is broken, and we want to implement more things like that in our education process to help kids out. So
absolutely. Schools are starting to come through, I think, at least from what I've seen in the last 5-10 years. At least some schools, it's obviously school to school basis, but I've had some schools hitting me up about sort of composting systems and like some of those sustainable growing workshops and things like that. The insect hotels are a really popular one. Which I'm always for, because biodiversity is like, it's very interesting, but it's really, really important, and we're losing it so quick. It's going to be a bit of a boring world with just pigeons and rats,
Yep. No, definitely. I think
as tasty as they are.
No, that's it. It's but I think the success I've seen with schools over the years, I think if you get that real champion in a school, that like an admin or a teacher or a principal, someone that really wants to do it. Like we done a couple of projects schools in Sydney where we did some aquaponic shipping containers, and we did some gardens, some chickens and things like that. So, but we had a principal there that he was a permaculture champion. He loved it. He'd done a course, and he really wanted to instill that in the children. I think it's like anything in life, it's that leadership, that we really require to get people on board with. And I think, the schools that really take that on, like I was amazed with how engaged the kids were, that we had in those permaculture classes through the school. So yeah, it's good fun.
Yeah, they love it. I swear, like, I mean, I remember being quite hard at attention in some of these classes, but as soon as it comes to like getting outside, and I mean, most kids are they just want to go out half the time,
Yeah.
right? So it's like if you start taking them to the places they want to go, and just the amazement of like looking under a log and then hearing about what exactly they're seeing and how it plays a role in the nutrient cycling systems of the environment, and how we could apply that in our own gardens and like food growing systems. I just find that stuff really cool. Yeah. And so important.
Yeah,
so even
100%.
as just like a ramp into that that mode of thinking, it's like it's such an important thing to touch on in these places. So
Yep,
yeah,
that's it. Well, yes. So to me, like the way I think about permaculture, and I suppose what really I love about it, it's it's all a design system, isn't it? So if you can it's that mentality and look at how to solve problems, and it's I remember that one of the last things we said when we did our PDC, and I think if I get this right, was I think it's that the solution is always at the core of the problem, or something like that,
Yeah.
So that the solution was always a part of the problem in the first place. So having that thinking, I think that's one of the biggest things with permaculture. It's just the mindset, a thought process, and design. If we can design our lives a lot better, we have a better experience in life.
Yeah. If you yeah, I've always liked that when you see a problem, I try to teach. So you go, all right, that might be a problem right now, but if you look at it, it's actually telling you something. So in the world of plants, oh, my cabbage is covered in aphids. What's happening? I'm a bad gardener. Like, no, you just have to think, okay, the aphids, they're telling you something. Something's out of balance in the system. So you can sort of go, all right, well, if the plant is stressed in some way, it doesn't have as many defenses up to make its sap a little more bitter for the aphids, so they're not as hungry for it. Because like any of these animals, they're looking for an easy meal, right? And so the more of them are there, the easier that meal is likely to be, and that's why they're gathering. And so yeah, you can just you're using this logical system to figure out the core of the issue. And then, okay, oh, my cabbage might not be getting enough water, or I'm giving it too much. Or so by seeing that problem, instead of just going, oh, I have to treat the problem outright, you treat it at the core, and then you're going to have better cabbage and less pest problems.
Yep. No,
Yeah,
totally.
that applies across the board. Yeah, but I use a lot of garden examples, obviously.
No, totally. So, man, you're in you're based in an urban environment. So, tell us more about the challenges of doing this stuff in an urban environment, because a lot of people that especially what I do in my business, most people are off grid. They're buying big properties and going remote and rural, but I'm actually the completely opposite of all my customers. I'm completely off grid in the middle of town, and I love it. I love the challenge of a small property. I've got some. I think we had a real estate agent the other day because we're thinking about selling, and he come out, and then 2 days later he called me up and said, "Mate, I just want to tell you, that is the biggest solar system I've ever seen on a residential property ever." And I was like, "Mate, it's only 145 square meter house, and like we've got a 25 kilowatt system up, and like literally it's big." So I like
you can't see the roof.
No, you can't. Like, my thing, this is my thing. Like I actually feel you're being unfair to corrugated iron. Like it shouldn't be sunburnt. That stuff shouldn't live in the sun, for all its life. So I like to protect it and coat it with solar panels. So my attitude with solar panels is, fill your roof and cover your roof, but protect your corrugated iron, with tiles or whatever. So that's how I size the solar system, mate. Just fill the roof.
Yeah. Hey, and look, when they finally get on top of solar paint, and things like that, I'm excited for it. Yeah. As if we can get as much solar coverage. I mean, apart from the fact that like we're using the space for energy generation, it's like maybe it will take a bit of the heat out of the equation as well if we're converting it really well to like energy, and then we're saving on cooling bills in our summer and that sort of thing. Yeah, I mean, there's multiple applications there. Can't wait for the new tech, but
totally
take it all.
Yeah. So from a permaculture designer point of view, if someone's in an urban environment, like where do you recommend they should start, or some things that people could do in that urban environment to make the biggest impact?
Yeah. So I like, Honestly, just start somewhere small. Even if you've got a lot of space, and quite honestly, not everybody and a fair few people, most people don't have access to that space. And with the current cost of property and things like that, there's less people that are able to reach that sort of thing. So you can, as you're saying, get off grid in a suburban area, and you just have to be smart about it. So again, as far as like say growing food, you are to a point limited by the space that you have available, but there's an enormous amount you can do to increase, especially with permaculture, increase the availability of cropping space. So you can go up walls. Using vertical space is really good. Plenty of vines produce a lot of food, and they require something to climb on anyway. So any fences, and man, there are plenty of fences in suburbia.
Yeah.
Colorbond is thick and fast out here. So and Colorbond, I mean, you were saying you like protecting your sheet metal. I'm like, hey, that stuff is over engineered for a fence. You should grow something on it. That's
Yeah.
crazy over engineered for a fence. So
Well, they engineered
if
it
you
to
can put
hang
a
your pop
trellis up.
out.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You could do a green wall off half of these things, and it wouldn't blink, you know. So,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So green walls, aquaponics systems are super cool. If you just have a lot of hard surfacing, and sometimes you just can't really, you can't really choose what's available to you because the people that came before you might have had like 6 caravans, and for some reason just like hoarding caravans and they just like cemented their entire backyard, and you're like, well, this is 6 foot thick, I don't know what they buried in there, I'm not going to question it, but I'm just going to go on top. And so yeah, some things like, converting your IBCs, I'm sure people know what they are, international bulk containers, to
Yep.
aquaponic systems where you can grow like fish and veggies in like a closed loop. That's very cool, and you don't necessarily need open soil for that. So
Yep.
for adapting to like industrial, if you've got like soil toxicity problems, that's also excellent, because you're not touching the soil. This is a separated system, and also wicking beds. So like where I am, I've got a really wide, an abnormally wide driveway and a long driveway, and so like you can almost fit 2 cars side to side on it, but not quite. And so I've basically converted some bathtubs into wicking beds, and they don't require soil, like ground soil. They're basically like a large wicking pot, but you can grow separate to the ground in that, and that can just sit on cement or pavers or whatever. And so you're making available cropping space in a place which definitely wouldn't be a growing space otherwise. So
Yeah.
there's tons of tricks like that. But yeah, you shouldn't even let like being in an apartment with a balcony stop you at least do something. Yeah.
Yep.
Even a little bit is worth something. Yeah.
Yep.
You shouldn't
No,
let a
totally.
little bit stop you doing something at all. Yeah.
No, definitely. So, maybe with
Uh,
with the aquaponics, I'd like to delve more into that
mm,
there. And there's a project you did with a swimming pool, because we've done a couple of natural swimming pools with a couple of customers, natural swimming pools, and for
mm,
us, the natural swimming pool is amazing because it's so energy efficient. Because that's all I care about. When it comes
yeah.
to designing the off-grid price properties and doing the energy audit, but they're so energy efficient. So, mate, I'll just brought your website up here. So tell us more about this project here, using the IBCs with the swimming pool, and making a
Mm.
natural swimming pool, and how it works. Tell us more about it.
Yeah, so well, this is a family down Martinsville way, and the guy there, he's so keen and so brave when it comes to just trying these new things out. So the way this one's set up, this was built from scratch, and so basically you got the shell pool, and it's using bubble lifts, which is like a really low energy way of shifting water around. and so it actually uses just an air compressor and running tubes to air stones, and the bubbles in the bottom of a pipe that's full of water actually create lift by friction with the bubbles against the water, and so that it drags water with it. And so instead of running like a pool pump, like an active pump, which is quite energy expensive, you can just use a single air compressor, and that the power of that can shift all of this water basically from the main pool volume through these IBC grow beds. And so this is sort of still in early days at the moment. And so generally, like from this experience, I would probably recommend, like if you're setting something like this up, you'd want to go for something that had like you've set the plants to grow up to as close to maturity as possible before you start running the system in completion, or start using the system. Because you start using the pool, and like the nutrient load starts increasing because of what comes off us.
Yeah.
And so the whole idea with a natural pool, instead of using like you know, and you know this, but for the listeners, you know, instead of using like, you know, salt and chlorine to kill off all the stuff that wants to grow on the available nutrient, you're actually trying to strip the nutrient load away from the water with as much plant growth as possible before it cycles back to the pool volume. Now, I personally prefer the idea of having like some integrated grow spaces within a pool. But I'm more of a person that doesn't mind swimming with fish and other organisms and having plants brush against me and things like that. But that's harder for people to get a taste for, I think, when they've grown up with these very sterile water bodies. Whereas I used to swim in rivers and stuff. It's like more my bag.
Yep.
You never know if there's an eel coming around your calf or whatever, you know. So it's a little bit freaky, but it's also part of the fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, the idea is basically this water's cycling past the roots of these plants, and there's substrate these plants are growing in, and so the plants can't take up sort of the dissolved nitrogen and phosphorus and stuff straight up. There needs to be a bacteria doing the nutrient. There's a change between type of nitrogen, nitrates, goes nitrites, nitrates, I believe, and then the plants can actually use it as a growth nutrient. So the bacteria are actually an integral part of that system, because the plants wouldn't just be able to take the nutrients straight out of the water without that conversion process. Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that all make sense?
Yep.
Do you think?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
If
I mean,
not,
it's actually like simpler than it sounds, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's about making sure that you've got more plants than you would require. So because to stop algae, like algae is one of the things that's like, it's such a natural part of a water ecosystem, right? So
Yeah.
and that's one of the things that throws people off. They're like, my pool's going green. Oh my God, I can't touch it. And like, well, if it's blue-green, then I'd worry about it. That's poisonous. But the idea is like, algae is really quick to take nutrient load, and a lot of it's like phosphorus load is really important for string algae is a big one for these things. I'm sure everyone's seen string algae before. It's sort of filamentous stuff floating through the water, grabbing onto surfaces.
Yep.
And its main growth nutrient is phosphorus. And so if you keep the phosphorus, for example, stripped as far down as possible in the water, as in close to zero, then you're limiting the building blocks for that algae growth, and then you're ending up with much clearer, cleaner water. So, and making sure that there's more plants, that you want the plants to be hungry all the time.
Yeah.
Seems a bit mean, doesn't it?
Try to keep them keen, mate. You know.
That's right. Yeah, keen for that nutrient. That's what you're trying to do. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, so
Yeah.
if someone's got a natural swimming pool and they're getting the algae more, they want more plants to basically help.
That's usually how it goes. Yeah. And honestly, like, I think there's a little bit of like psychology around this as well, in that like, as a natural swimming pool, you have to accept that there's going to be a little more natural life.
Yeah.
And a little bit of algae is probably just going to be around, like it's nothing to be afraid of, again, as long as it's not blue-green algae. But, if you've got that, there's other problems. So, a little bit of algae is like, it's almost inescapable in this sort of system. But if you've got an enormous amount of it, like I was saying before, that's a problem that you can be like, what's that telling me? I need more plants, because they're obviously not stripping enough nutrient out. And then you have to think, okay, well, I've got so many plants and so much filter bed going on. What else is happening here? What water is entering the system and what's in that water already? So if you're topping up your swimming pool via your roof, and there's birds pooping on your roof, then that's a nutrient income. And that nutrient is then potentially, if it's like a fair bit of it in a flush, then you're going to have an expansion, basically, of that nutrient. It's going to be a boom. Yeah. And so the more plants you've got, the more flexibility you've got for that nutrient to be taken up. The whole idea with your natural pools is, you should try to avoid expecting it to be completely devoid of life, because that's not the point. There is a reason it's a natural pool, and it's a living thing. So it's just about balances, and so you're trying to keep the balance in your natural pool shifted towards nutrient extraction, which is why your plants need to be like in full swing as much as possible, because that's when they're going to be taking as much of that nutrient load out of the water and doing the filtering for you. Keeping that that nutrient low means you're going to have less algae bloom and other sort of eutrophication, which is the darkening of the water for various reasons.
It's I think it's hard for people to. I know for me, it's a challenge to watch nature and let nature do its thing and sort things out. I mean, people just want to interact and get involved, and I think sometimes better left alone. It'll sort itself out.
Yeah, that's right. And the thing is, like with a living system, like these things mature. And so you can't expect like a natural swimming pool or even a pond, to look beautifully clear and vigorous in the first, couple of months after installation, because it takes time for these bacteria to get a good population going. Plants take time to establish and get into full biological swing, all this stuff. Same with gardens. You can't expect a garden to produce straight away. It's just going to get better and better and better over time.
No, that's it. Mate, well, thank you. I really appreciate your time, and we'll put all Lockie's contact details in below, so you can check it out and get in contact with him. And mate, thank you, and we'll talk to you next time.
Yeah, good to meet you, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, mate. I hope you enjoyed this episode and found the content educational and inspiring. If you got something out of it and you think you know someone else that would actually also enjoy it, we'd really appreciate if you could share the link with them and encourage them to check out our channel. And don't forget, you can join the Off Grid Tribe podcast for free, where you can actually ask and interact with myself and also our guest speakers. So jump over today to offgridtribe.com, register yourself an account where you can actually have a conversation with myself and one of our guest speakers, and we can continue the conversation there. Together, let's embrace the power of sustainable living.